Right, women's property and inheritance rights. That's what the discussion we promised you earlier on. And before we even get to it, we actually went to the streets and asked Kenyans their own perspective and opinion about the issue of women and inheritance. Let's get to listen to what some of them had to say.
Naona mwanamke hafai kurithi mali kwa vile uko na wasichana wengi. Hao wasichana wanafaa kuheshimu huyu mfulana kwa vile mfulana ndio kichwa na ndio ngao kwa familia. Yeye ndio anafaa kurithi mali na anafaa kuheshimiwa. Juu msichana akirithi hiyo mali anazochukua kwake mahali ameolewa, na hivyo utamalizia kupoteza hiyo mali yako.
Natakikana kila mtu aiwe kurithi ya wazazi. Watu wote wakwe equal.
Kama mimi ni single mother, naongea ukweli, itabidi nipewe hata mimi. Kwa nini? Sababu watoto wote situlisaliwa. Kama mimi mwenyewe ama single mother, kama ikisindikana, sintapewa, mbona nisipewe? After late.
Various Kenyans from across the country just giving us their perspective on what we are about to talk about. And we promised you this discussion is about women's rights to property and inheritance in Kenya. The constitution has provided for them. But if you go to the ground, as people say, things are a bit different, and we want to find out what's going on and how can things be made different. We have a fantastic, of course, lined up of guests ready to help us with this discussion. With me in studio this morning, Kenneth Akach is a program associate at Women's Lands and Property Rights at Killeen. Good morning, Ken, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor. Good morning.
All right, also joining us in studio this morning is Sandra Oyombe. She's a senior legal counsel at FIDE. Good morning and welcome to the show, Sandra.
Thank you very much for having me in this show.
All right, and joining us virtually this morning is Jen Kendi. She's a business lady and she's joining us all the way from Lodwar, and will also be joined in a short while by the Honorable Justice Anthony Ombwayo, who is the presiding judge at the Environment and Lands Court in Kisumu. Will be joining us in a short while. But before we get to hear from the rest of my guests, this is a conversation that we also want to involve you. And we asked you, of course, on our question of the day, what's your opinion? What's your take on the issue of women and inheritance? You can send that feedback on Twitter at NTV Kenyan, at Victor Kiprop _ use the hashtag #NewNormal. You could also send the same feedback on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you're not on social media, you have a mobile phone, and you can call in on the numbers which will be below your screen. Maybe, Ken, to start us off, let me just listen to your introductory remarks on the subject, especially in the context of the sound bites that we've just played of different Kenyans from across the country.
Thank you, Victor. That is an interesting view. From our end, Killeen, we work under different thematic areas, and women, land and property rights is one of the thematic areas. So today we'll just focus on that thematic area. Moving to the soundbite that we have just heard, the gentleman saying that land should only be owned by men. Actually, he is justified if he is speaking from his cultural perspective, because the culture, most of our communities in Kenya are patriarchal in nature, and that is the perspective that the gentleman is speaking from. But if he would be speaking from an informed point of view, then he would have not said what he said. I would like to disagree with him, because under our constitution, that is Article 27, we have equitable or equal rights, that is both men and women. And we also have the family being provided for, and members of family, we expect them to be treated equally. And lastly, we also have a family. That is a family that would start, if you live alone, his sisters and brothers. So with his spouse, he should also start a family, and the same, the couple has equal rights before the marriage, during, and at dissolution. So the law provides that we have equal rights, both men and women. And that is one of the challenges that we are facing at the community level when we are trying to advocate for equitable rights for both for both parties, that is the men and women.
And definitely I'll be very much interested to hear what you have to say about those issues at the community level. But let me just allow Sandra to give us her introductory remarks on this conversation of the day. Sandra.
First of all, I would like to just thank you for creating this opportunity where we would come and have a discourse around women property rights. I think this aligns to the Federation of Women Lawyers' vision, which is to ensure a society that is free from all forms of discriminations against women. So for us, this is a very good platform in which we can create awareness through the media engagement as an avenue of just sensitizing the community on gender rights. Secondly is to maybe speak on what our viewers have presented on their perspectives around property ownership. We have seen the gentleman speak about men and the fact that men should be the ones owning the property and not women, and the woman has brought out the aspect of her being a single woman, and therefore she should be entitled to ownership of property. This depicts the tensions that are there, the gender tensions that are there. Gender in this context refers to the various roles that individuals are associated with in society. It's a social construct. So you will see that gender roles keep on shifting based on economic, political, and social context. And in this case, you can see a woman who is telling you she's single, she's not married. So she's a sole provider of the family, and therefore she has a right to inherit. And the man has still the patriarchal perspective to life, and he's of the view that men, according to African culture, should be the ones inheriting property. So these tensions are what we are going to discuss here. It's going to be quite an informative session to just understand what is posited in the law, policies, and actually what should be applied in practice.
All right. Thank you, Sandra. And before I bring in Jen, maybe Ken, this issue of culture is really what has already come out, even in the very first few minutes of this conversation. From where you sit, the programs that you run at Kelly, interacting with the people on the grassroots level, how much of an impediment are these cultures and retrogressive traditions which bend towards patriarchy? How much of an impediment are they towards securing women's rights to property and even their inheritance rights?
Thank you. That's a good question. Culture, the retrogressive culture is actually one of the major impediments to women's access or ownership of land and inheritance rights. And it is one of the things that from the very early stages of life, we are brought up knowing that these are the gendered roles and these are the rights that are in the community. So as we grow, we get to ingrain that into our system. And then there's an element of lack of awareness of the progressive law that we have. We have very good laws, that is the Constitution, accompanied by succession law. We have Matrimonial Property Act that are actually speaking to equality or gendered, it's giving a gendered view of sharing of property. But culture, we have communities that are somehow cut from the information, the progressive information. There's lack of awareness that we find that there is a big difference or gap between policy and practice. We've created the policies, we have them, but most of the people in the community actually do not know anything about it. If I may give an example, at Kellen we did a research on culture against the law, and one of our findings was that in as much as we have the law, but there's that a mentality that culture precedes the law, which is not the actual position. So we developed a curriculum which we name Securing Your Family's Future. This curriculum we used to train 350 men and 200 women on changing attitude on land and property and inheritance issues. So after the training, we find that most of the trainees actually come out openly and start conversations with their peers and other people about equitable land and property rights and inheritance rights, because now they know what the law provides and actually they see the importance of having equitable or sharing property where women have access to property, because if you look at statistics, we have only 1% of women owning land, title deeds to land. 1% in Kenya, and another 5% owning property jointly with men. The remaining 96% is owned by men. So you find that culture has greatly contributed to this, followed closely by lack of awareness on the progressive law that we are having. And you find that on the land that is mostly owned by men, it is the women that provide most of the labor force. You find we are an agricultural country. So for the labor force, almost 80% is provided by women. So where there is a dispute and the woman or the widow is thrown out of the land, you find that almost the whole family will suffer because the children will not have food security. The woman will not have source of income. She will not have any dependence. And then this contributes to the circle of poverty that we are having in our country. If you look at it on the other way around, where women are able to secure property and actually work on it, you find that the family, actually stability of the family is promoted, and there is growth, not just stability, but even economic growth of the family. Thank you.
Okay, and that's I mean, from where it sits, Sandra, this figure of 1% of women owning land, 5% jointly owning it with men in a country where the population is actually a ratio of 1 to 1. I mean, that's not even fair.
No, it's not fair at all.
Okay.
Yes.
And let me ask you then, from where you sit, what does the Constitution say about people of both genders owning property? Because from what Ken is talking about, only 1% of women own land today. What does the law say about women owning land?
Thank you very much for that. I think that's a very critical question, noting that statistics that has been provided by my colleague here. We have very progressive policies and legislation that touch on issues of gender rights. And by extension, women property rights. And I will begin with the Constitution, which of course is the Grundnorm and where people should refer to when they are dealing with any matter across in any sphere of life. So the Constitution is very clear, and it's a transformative, it's gender transformative, if that's a term I should use. Why am I saying that the Constitution is gender transformative? The Constitution has provisions, if you look at the Constitution under Article 27, that is tailored towards ensuring equality of both parties, parties before the law, that everyone is equal before the law and should be accorded equal treatment in law. That affirms the fact that we are equal in law.
The eyes
and
of the
therefore,
law.
It goes further to state that that women and men have equal rights and they should enjoy those equal rights. And therefore, the implication of that section is this, that if we have equal rights as men and women and intersex, because there's also the other gender, then the other party should refrain from infringing that right. The article goes further to give the state the obligation to ensure the promotion, fulfillment, and protection of equal rights. So that has been clearly affirmed under Article 27 of the Constitution. And it obligates the state, in order for it to ensure fulfillment, it has, it comes up with affirmative programs to ensure that those who have been disadvantaged historically for a long period of time can be in the same level playing field with those who have had opportunities and resources. And this is where actually the question of whether equality as posited in the legislation applies on the ground, like you have said. Yes.
And that's where the problem of, because if we really have this progressive laws as we refer to them, and I think this is true because if you compare them with many African countries, we are a bit ahead. So where does the problem come in when it comes to, because there's clearly a gap between policy and practice?
Yes, definitely there is. And I think that's where we see the nuances. If you put the notion of equality and the nuances that come as a result of the reality on the ground, you will find that what is posited in law is not really applicable, or rather is slightly being applied in practice because of the whole notion of what equality is. Now, this relates also to, I'll give an example of property ownership, women property ownership, and go straight to Article 45, which speaks about both men and women having equal rights during the existence, subsistence of a marriage and dissolution of a marriage. And that's where you see a practical tension on the question of equality, because both of them, while in marriage, have equal rights. However, tension begins when you are nullifying the marriage, and therefore the question is who owns the property, or how should the property be distributed. Ideally, in Kenyan law and the land laws of this country, we recognize the person who is registered as the owner of the title of property, and that's the person whose name is appearing in the title. However, in the marriage context, taking into consideration the provisions of Article 45 of the Constitution, as read with Article 27, which speak on equality, then the question would be, is the person who is registered, the registered owner of that title, the person entitled to exclusive rights to ownership of that property? That is not the case. Now, if you look at various pieces of legislation that have been enacted, like the Matrimonial Property Act, it speaks about property ownership during marriage is equal between the man and woman. And it goes further to define what contribution is, because when you're looking at ownership of property in the context of the marriage or family, you look at contribution of parties. I think it is important to understand why the Act and the Constitution brought, or the crafters of the Constitution and the Matrimonial Property Act came up with the levels of contribution to include childcare, to include companionship, to include nurturing the children. That's contribution that needs to be factored in when you're looking at ownership of property in the family context.
And I'm definitely interested in terms of the limitations of these laws, especially even that one of how do we quantify your contribution as a companion, how do we quantify your contribution as for childcare. But before we do that, I mean, Jen Kendi is ready to join us. She's joining us all the way from Lodwar. Good morning, Jen. How are you this morning?
I'm okay.
All right.
Doing good this morning.
Asante sana. And I think most of the things that Sandra, Ken, and myself are talking about right now are things that you can relate from a personal level. Just talk to us about how you relate to these issues.
Okay, yes, the things they're talking about, I can really relate with my life as per now. When I lost my husband in 2019. And from 2019, I've been battling with cases here and there because of properties, whereby you find that most of the widows in this country, they're really suffering. Some, they have nowhere to express themselves. They are suffering in silence. Others like us, maybe now that we got a little education and managed to go to school, at least we know a bit of our rights. So you find that most of the women, especially the widows, they are really suffering because when the husband passes, you find that the other family is really struggling to get what you guys struggle to get. That is the husband and the wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and maybe if I can stay with you, Jen, definitely we sympathize with your situation. But from where you sit, I want to assume that the property that you jointly owned with your late husband was something you used to manage together. And definitely after his passing, this property should have stayed with you. Where exactly did the issue or problems arise?
Okay, you find that in a family whereby your husband and wife, when you buy most of the properties, they get to be written under the husband's name, and now the wife is left out. So like you can find you have a plot, but you struggled very hard to get the plot, you and the husband, but now when you're getting the plot, it's written under his name, and the wife now is left out. So when the husband passes, whereby he has not left any will, or so you find that the other family now comes in and they want to grab what maybe their brother or their sons and left behind, whereby they think that the wife was just there doing nothing, so she has no right to get anything from that family.
Okay. Before I come back to my guest in studio, Jen, then so it's been since 2019, it's 2021 now. Maybe have you resolved part of this disputes that you had, and what kind of nature were they exactly?
Okay, my husband passed in 2019 June in a road accident where he was coming from Kakuma to Lodwa back home. It was in the evening. And you find that after he passed, through the road accident, people change even that he didn't pass because of a road accident, but I put an ad for him on the road, like there's something I did for him to have the road accident, or you find that they say maybe you put poison or you've attacked the vehicle, so many things. And from that, they try to fix you, whereby you find yourself now, you add a thing to his death so that you are disinherited from his property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you managed to resolve these issues about property so far?
We are still battling in court. Still matters are continuing in court.
Okay.
I hope
all right.
Everything will be
okay. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Jen. Let me allow you, Sandra, to briefly react to what Jen has been talking about.
First of all, I would like to just say, Pole, for what you have faced, being that you cannot own property, and the family has disinherited you from the property that you have actually acquired with your husband before his demise. We are very sorry for that, but what I would like to assure you is that we have laws and policies in place that ensure that they protect women's rights. Number two is to understand that when we talk about property ownership in the family context, we look at it from two perspectives. One is with respect to ownership of property when the other party is alive. And therefore, there is the aspect of Matrimonial Property Act, which governs issues to do with property that is being distributed when both parties are alive. And when one dies, then we look at succession laws, which now govern the management of the estate of a person when he is gone. And this means those who are the next of kin should now take the appropriate actions to ensure that they continue managing the estate of the deceased. And this is where the succession laws, if your husband died, for example, with a will, then if he clearly stipulated who the executor or executrix is in the event of a woman or the wife, then that would help a lot in just charting the way forward on who should manage the estate of the deceased. However, if the deceased died intestate means without a will, then there are mechanisms that have been put in place under the Succession Act to ensure that the next of kin or the beneficiaries are able to secure, use, manage, and control the property that the deceased has left.
Actually, before you go to Ken, on that issue of succession then, so for instance, if I'm married today, and I have a wife, and I also have my family, I mean, my mom and my brothers and my sisters, and then, God forbid, I pass on. What does the law say in terms, if I do not leave any will behind, who has higher rights to my property? Is it my family, my brothers, my sisters, my parents, or is it the spouse and the children?
Okay, the succession laws actually have incorporated the African culture and way of family setup very well. It has incorporated issues of polygamy, monogamy, all that is considered in the succession laws, and the succession laws are very clear that where the properties in dispute relate to people who ascribe to the Islamic faith, then they may invoke the provisions of the Quran or the Islamic faith in distribution of property. So when we are looking at succession laws, Section 26 of the Succession Act is clear on who the beneficiaries are. It has clearly elaborated who the beneficiaries are, and if you look at that section, it puts the hierarchy of who should benefit from the property. It begins with the wife or wives. Okay? So it caters for polygamy. And also the children are in the first tier of the people who should benefit from the estate of the deceased. Then it moves to the parents of the deceased if they are alive. And if they are not, then we move to the uncle, the step brothers, the step brothers and sisters, or the brothers and sisters, and then step brothers and sisters, and then uncles and aunties now come at the tail end. So it has clearly stipulated the hierarchy.
A very wonderful legal lesson I'm having. But so really, I mean, Ken, from where you said, so it's clearly stipulated the spouse, and then the parents, and then the brothers and the sisters, or step-brothers and step-sisters. But from where you sit, having interacted with people in the villages and all that, I'm sure you've run into situations where maybe the parents or the brothers and the siblings lay claim, and they believe that their claim should be more superior than of the spouse.
Yes, that is a timely question, noting that it's something that is so rampant in the community. You find that the mentality of the community is that this is our son or this is our daughter, so it is us who have that right. He is our brother, so it is us who have that right vis-a-vis a lady who came to our community. Secondly, it is viewed from a perspective that, just as Jen had shared, that it is the wife, the widow. The widow had a hand in the deceased shortcomings. And that is just an avenue that is being used to get to disinherit the widow. And most of the time they don't even take up the matter to the court, as Sandra has said. There's need to conduct succession before you are accessible to the property. Failure to do that, it is a criminal offense called intermeddling. But this is something that is on a daily basis. It's happening in the community. They will just move in, take whatever they can take. At some instances, they are very violent. The widow will be sent packing with nothing. She will just have to run for her life. And thereafter, before anything could be done, some of the property has been disposed of, and tracking who actually did what is a problem. So how do we counter this? This is something that we counter by sensitizing the community. We sensitize the community on their rights, because we find most of the widows do not know their rights. As Sandra has mentioned, we try to sensitize them and create that awareness. You have right to 1, 2, 3, and at the point of or at the unfortunate moment where your husband passes on, you are the one who has that right. So this widow who has been informed of her rights can actually stand up and say no, it is my right to take over what my husband has left.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And I'm definitely very much interested to hear much more, because sometimes we just focus on the issue of the widows alone. We even forget about sisters. But before we do that, I believe the Honorable Justice Anthony Umbwayo is the presiding judge of the Environment and Lands Court in Kisumu, is now ready to join us. A very good morning to you, Justice Umbwayo, and how are you this morning live from the city of Kisumu?
I'm fine, Mr. Kiprop.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Maybe if we can jump in straight. We've just been discussing the issues of women's rights to property and inheritance, the challenges so far, and why, despite the progressive laws that we have in place and really all the measures that we've put in place, women still are discriminated when it comes to these issues. And part of what I want to discuss with you is also the role of the judiciary in this, because part of these laws are executed in the courts, and the courts should provide solutions to part of the issues that these women and widows face in the villages. But statistics show, and I want you to help us verify this, that just 1% of actually these cases relating to women make it to the courts today. How true is this? And maybe from where you sit, why do you think this is the situation?
Thank you, Mr. Kiprop. And as you're aware,
yeah,
before the current position,
yeah,
women's rights for inheritance used to be less enforced. But with the current constitution, which is so progressive, the rights are clearly spelled out and being enforced. And as you know, our society is patriarchal in the sense that in the communities, people believe that girls and, let's say, women have less rights when it comes to inheritance compared to the men and the boys.
Okay.
But the courts have interpreted the constitution and the current laws progressively, to the extent that the women are encouraged to pursue their inheritance rights in the patriarchal society, and it has also encouraged the men to respect the rights of the women when it comes to inheritance.
Okay.
And that's why you find that the court insists on parties, all the beneficiaries of the deceased, to come to court and be verified in terms of inheritance. And that's why you find that girls or the women come to court to choose whether they want to inherit the property or do not want to inherit the property. So it goes on record that they are interested or not interested. And if you come from the village, you will find that some of the women might not be interested brothers over their father's properties. That has to be recorded by the court, because later, when something happens where the woman has gone, she might come back to court and say that she was disinherited. And the courts will fine for the woman.
Okay. And we're definitely struggling with the justice's signal. We'll be back to him. But if I can come back to you, Sandra, what I am getting from all this is, despite the progressive laws that we have, there's still a challenge in terms of implementation. But also, there's also an issue of the limitations of the current laws. And I think you had just started to touch on them earlier on.
Yes. Actually, when we look at the limitation of laws, I think it is important to understand why the crafters of the Constitution, as well as the Matrimonial Property Act, decided or put the equality principle in the law, as well as defined contribution to include non-monetary contribution. It is important so that when our viewership understand this, they'll be able to contextualize why, when we claim for women's right, inclusion in property ownership, we make this case.
Okay.
All right. So the analysis of why we had to include, or the crafters of the legislation included non-monetary contribution, is because of the understanding of the gender roles that both the male and the female play. The principle of equality is not on the basis that I am equal to a man or a man is equal. Because those are the nuances and the realities of applying the question, the equality principle. Are poor people equal to rich people? That is not the case. No, it is about the roles that the respective genders bring on the table in the society, and having them speak to each other so that they get to understand what is it that you're bringing on the table and what is it that this other party is bringing on the table. And that's why when you look at the question of contribution to the ownership of property or to succession, you need to look at, do a gender analysis and look at what is it that this woman contributed towards acquisition and maintenance of this property. And when you're looking at factors to consider in terms of contribution, you do look at the reproductive work that this gender, whether male or female, have brought on the table. Number one. Then the what is reproductive work? It is a question of rearing children, nurturing children. Or if you can look at it from the economic perspective, the rearing and nurturing the workforce that would perpetuate the maintenance of this property. And this includes the husband or the wife, in the context where the husband has lost a job due to COVID and is doing the domestic work. Because some go an extra mile to support you in the domestic work. Then the next indicator you would be looking at is the productive contribution. All right? So productive contribution relates to the work that you do either as male or female to work that has an economic value in it. You get compensated. So what have you done in terms of the productive value that has contributed towards acquisition and maintenance of that property? All right? Then there is an indicator of community management or engagement. What is it that the male gender or the female gender has done towards contributing to the maintenance of that property at a communal level? It may include bringing water, like for the women in upcountry, bringing water from the river towards sprinkling on the house when it is being
the property being
developed. When it is being developed, it can be the workforce who have come, the labor force who have come to construct the house. She's cooking for them githeri. That is contribution. So the crafters put this in mind when they were bringing up the notion of equality. It is not that we are all equal. It is just a question of just and fairness in analysis of the gender roles.
Yes. And I think these laws, the reasons why we put these laws in place is so that we can, of course, reduce or end discrimination against women in these situations. But do the limitations of the same laws actually end up, once again, discriminating the same women who have suffered for long? That's the questions we try and answer when we come back, as well as the importance of sensitization. We're going for a quick break, but when we come back, all my guests will be with me as we continue to talk about women's rights to property and inheritance. Don't go too far.
shopping guide. Shop during sales and promotions. Make sure you always have a shopping list. Glovo, you order, we deliver in minutes.
Get all your Naivas shopping delivered at home for only 60 shillings this September. Order Glovo, we deliver in minutes.
Customer preferences are changing daily. You wake up one day, an innovation has come up and the customer wants a service in a way that you've not delivered before. Textbook Center aims to provide service, products and solutions that exceed our customers' expectations. Partnering with Sandy Transport ensures that we are able to deliver on our promise of being more than a bookshop.
Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, we offer free delivery within the same day? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
Akili, 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 akili. Let's chase the germs away. Let's chase the germs away by keeping our hands clean. And when you want to sneeze or when you want to cough, do it in your elbow. Let's practice sneezing into your elbow. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Achoo! Again, achoo! Yay! You did it! Germs, 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 they make us sick. Germs, germs, germs are not our friends. Germs, 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 they make us sick. Germs, 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 germs are not your friends.
AMRC's objectives are aligned with the government's affordable housing pillar of the Big Four agenda. Visit any of the participating financial institutions today and start your home ownership journey. Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, unlocking liquidity for affordable housing.
Right, thank you for staying with Your World on NTV. This morning we are talking about women's rights to property and inheritance in Kenya. I'm still in the studio with Sandra Oyombe. She's a senior legal counsel at FIDA Kenya, as well as, of course, Kenneth Akach is a programs associate for women's lands and property rights at Kelin. And of course, I'm still joined by Jen Kendi. She's joining us all the way from Lord, where she's been able to talk to us and tell us her story and what this conversation of the day means for her. But really, if we can pick it up from where we left, Sandra, why, if we have such progressive laws, then why don't we see more women using these laws to protect themselves?
Of course, we have progressive laws, but one is an impediment of culture, and most, to put it into context, patriarchy and male dominance. I think the African, in the African context, we have been socialized to see women to be subordinate to the men, and therefore this trickles down to the gender roles or the roles and behavior that the women are supposed, or the society has constructed for them. And therefore you will see women aligning themselves, even young girls taking dolls, and you know, trying to nurture them.
Yeah.
So it begins from the time you're young, and because the society has constructed you in that space where the woman is supposed to be in the house, taking care of the children and doing the normal domestic house chores.
Yeah.
So that's how the African culture has socialized the woman and taught her to be submissive.
Yeah.
Let me just use that, to be submissive to the man. And submissiveness means that you do not challenge or you do not go outside to do norms that are otherwise perceived to be male dominated.
Yeah.
And that's why we still have tensions between the gender roles of women and those of men. I want to put it that gender roles, this means the roles and behaviors of both men and women, are constructed by the society based on culture, religion, and maybe the educational level, economic and political status. But the same norms that are constructed can be deconstructed. And that's why a lot of awareness creation on the rights of women is critical. Not just to women, but also men need to understand that the society has changed. Roles have changed. Where a man is no longer able to provide because of COVID and he has been laid off, if the woman has the opportunity and she's still working, she can still step in and support. That's a change of role, okay? Because now the woman will have to step in and provide for the family. That's a change of role, and that's gender deconstruction, because you're deconstructing the role and behavior that was expected of the woman to sit in the house and be doing the house chores. But because of economic situations, she has to go out and provide for the family. So the understanding of that, if you understand that and you do empowerment and sensitize the community about the rights that are there in the Constitution and various pieces of legislation, to understand why we are speaking about equality of what genders.
Actually, let me just bring in Ken at this point. Ken, you've done this issues of sensitization. How many women are actually aware of these laws and how far the laws actually go in protecting them?
Okay, thank you for that question. If I may chime in from where my senior and colleague was reacting on the limitation of the laws, we find that the Matrimonial Property Act is a limitation to access to property by women themselves, in that where it provides for contribution, distribution of property by contribution, whereas the Constitution provides for equal at the dissolution of marriage. You find that is the first limitation, because all I will have to bring is the title deeds have been able to register the number of titles to, or logbooks, properties have developed. On the other hand, whereas the woman was taking care of the house, nurturing the children, as my senior said, Sandra, you find that we will not be able to distribute this property equally. That is one impediment. That is based on the law. Similarly, the law of succession is an impediment to inheritance, in that at section 35, you find that it provides that a woman will lose her life interest in an estate where she remarries. But a man does not lose the same. So you find that this is subjective to the widow, but not to the widower. The widower is free to continue with life and keep the property. So you find that there is an imbalance based on the law.
If I can get that correctly, Ken, before we move on. So ideally, if I am the man and my wife passes on and I marry, I still continue to own my property. But if you're the widow and your husband has passed and you remarry, you lose interest in what you used to own? Is that
interest in your spouse's property. You see, you inherit your
that's
inheritance. That is the position we are saying. Fortunately, the law of succession is currently under review, and we submitted our memorandum and also presented during public participation. So it is something that is being looked at. We hope that once the document is finalized, we'll have a favorable law. Then looking at the same law again, most women do not know their rights, just as we have mentioned, lack of awareness. So we have developed information, education, communication material, popular version of the statutes or the laws or the policies. We developed one on succession steps together with Judiciary, and we uploaded it to our website. Whoever is interested can just Google SYFF website, and they will be able to access the material. And these, we've been getting called to guide the community persons on how to undertake succession. So you see, once community persons have been sensitized, that is one way that we advocate for people to claim their right. Once they know their rights, then they will come out openly. Going to the question that you asked a few minutes ago, that what do we do? The numbers are so big. While we were conducting our training, using the curriculum I had mentioned earlier on securing your family's future, we engaged 200 women. And out of the 200 women, at the initial stages of the training, we were just gauging their mind. What is their view or perception on land and property issues? And a resounding 90% said that is a reserve for the men. So as we were conducting the training and discussing the various legal provisions, vis-a-vis looking at the cultural provision, because I said that was a curriculum based on culture and the law. How is culture supportive of our life as human? You find that culture is anchored on the Constitution, and everybody is allowed to take part on cultural practices, but you should not be forced. So, and even cultural or customary laws, we are allowed to use them, but they should not violate the Constitution.
So, and because you mentioned customary laws, I think part of the problem I noticed with this, Sandra, is there part of these progressive laws at some point, especially to do with pastoral and agricultural lands, go back to deferring and referring to customary laws, which have been for a very long time a bit unfair against women.
Yes, if I may proceed, customary law, they are generally based on patriarchal mentality that we've been talking about. And to some extent, you find that currently we do not only have the customary law, but we have a blend of customary law and the modern law. So, for example, you'll find men saying that only men are allowed to hold title deeds. But initially, we did not have the titles. We only had land ownership. The research we have conducted amongst the Luo community, they say that in Luo community, women were allowed to inherit property. They were being allocated property, that is land. But you find there is a perception that women are not supposed to. So you find that these conflicting views is based on the perceived culture and modernization. That is one of the problems we are facing in the community. But if we backtrack, the Constitution only allows us to use culture to an extent that it does not violate anybody's right or the Constitution. So it means that which violates the Constitution should not be applicable. Secondly, nobody should be forced to observe any cultural practice. So after sensitizing the women, and by the end of the training, we had, it was a 8 weeks training, just 1 day per week. But by the end of the 8 weeks, we had 30 of the women actually starting the processes of registering their marriage. They had started processing land titles, even joint ownership. They were going for individual, so as a woman or together with their spouses, and they were now holding conversation with their spouses, and making joint decision, you find that that percept that whatever the man says, which is anchored on patriarchy, is already defeated by sensitization.
Okay, so awareness is really such a big deal. But let me just bring in Jen at this point. Jen, from I don't know, is it 2020 or 2019 when you began to seek justice, especially in the corridors of justice in the courts and all that? What's the biggest challenge you faced during that period that you've been in court trying to get justice?
Okay, mine started in 2019, and I'd say first the awareness part is the big problem, whereby widows are really suffering because they don't know where to start. Because I remember, like mine, when my husband passed, I was just 26 years old. I just left school like 2 years back, and I didn't know a lot on what I should do. My husband has left. I'm in court. I've never been in court battling with. I've never had a case in court. So you find that most of the widows, they're very young. They don't know what their rights are. They have, like now we live in Turkana. You find that most of the people here, maybe those who come from the interior part, they have not gone to school. They don't know anything. Even they don't know there is a court to fight for them. So you find that people are suffering. Things have been taken from them that belong to their husbands, and they struggle to get them. But now, because they don't understand what to do, so you find them, they suffer in silence. So I'll say the awareness part is the big problem. Another problem also is the financial part. Whereby you find that most, like at my age, at 26 years, I just left school. I didn't have a job. So you're supposed to be in court. You need a lawyer. A lawyer needs to be paid. I remember even at first, the feeder really played a big role in my case when it was starting, and also the well-wishers who really helped me. Because now you don't have financial. Like you don't have money to help you hire a good lawyer, that is a nice lawyer who can fight your battles in court. So whereby a widow finds herself doesn't have money, so you just give up, and those who have money, maybe the in-laws fighting you, you just give up and everything is gone. You just watch from far as they take everything.
Okay, and if you allow me to ask you this again, so for the property that you're still contesting with, of course, your family in court, are you managing it at the moment?
Yes, I'm managing, because the reason why I'm managing, when my husband left, everything was left in Lodwar, and my other family is far apart. So I'm still having the property, though we have problems in court.
Okay, and maybe from where you sit, do you have any estimation on how soon this case can be concluded?
For sure, I can't tell. Because as you can see, my cases started a week after my husband passed, whereby even he had to stay for the morgue for 1 month and 2 weeks before he was buried, because we had matters in court. Still, after that one, the first one ended, I thought maybe everything has settled and maybe I can have my own peace and take care of my kids, as I have very tiny babies with me. But later on, 2 years down the line, cases again started coming up. And when they started, it's case after another, case after another. So like as we speak, I have like 3 cases whereby even one of my kids has been rejected. My family has also said the kid doesn't belong to my husband. And those problems, you find that those problems were not there when my husband passed. But after my husband now has left, they have the guts to even request for a DNA for my last born, because they say the kid wasn't his. But when my husband left, I even remember when I was giving birth, I was at their place, stayed there for like a month, and they were taking care of me. But now that my husband has passed, you find that so many petty issues come. So they have rejected the kid is in theirs, and so many other things whereby you find that a sister says she should be the next of kin, like she should be managing everything that belongs to the brother. And you find that they say, huyo msichana ni mdogo, ataenda aolewe mahali ingine, like I'll go and get married somewhere else, so I should not be managing my husband's property, rather it should be managed by the sisters and brothers, and actually the sisters, so which is very awkward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen, for your sharing your story and, of course, being brave enough to continue fighting for your rights. We wish you the best. But Sandra, really, I mean, other than what Ken had raised about the issue of awareness, there are other issues that are coming up, blocking women from accessing the formal justice system now, including the whole issue of cost.
Yes. I think aside from awareness creation, which was something that my colleague alluded to, as well as I, on the question of deconstructing the gender roles, I think the question of accessibility of justice is something that is still an impediment for women to access their rights in Kenya. And this is because of various factors. One is just the cost of litigating, which is an impediment because most clients or most women in Kenya are indigent. That means they can't afford, they live below the poverty line. And therefore, even the money to pay a lawyer, because there's a lot that goes into litigation. There's a money to pay the lawyer, there's a money to pay the disbursements that relate to filing cases in court, and there is a logistical cost of traveling from your place to where the court is, if the court is accessible. That's also another question. So that access to justice through the formal processes can be a bit challenging for women, and therefore you will see them approach the other alternative means of justice in order to get redress for the violations they have faced. And therefore, if you are to look at the justice satisfaction, needs and satisfaction survey that was done by the Judiciary and Hills, they actually put very clearly that 10% of Kenyans can access the formal court processes and actually understand the processes because it's technical. They also have challenges just understanding the language and processes of the court, so that limits them, aside from the cost and what I've mentioned. 40% access justice using the informal processes or alternative processes. So that points a picture to you that most Kenyans can only access the informal processes in resolution of disputes. Now, the question also that begs when you look at informal processes or alternative processes is how gender responsive and constitution compliant are these alternative processes. If you go to a traditional dispute resolution mechanism, how sure are you they are going to appreciate gender rights because they are ascribed most of the time to the culture?
I mean, it's a pity the justice is not here with us, but I mean, I would have wanted to hear from him. Even in the formal justice system, you're going in there and the judge is a man and you're going to defend yourself as a woman. There has to be that fear that he's seeing me from the eyes of a man as opposed to that of a judge.
Yeah, that can be so. But I would say that I have seen very progressive jurisprudence from the courts with respect to distribution of property and actually owning property using where their succession, where the other party is deceased. I think there has been very progressive court orders that we have received as FIDA Kenya because under the Access to Justice program, we provide free legal aid clinic. I think I will address that when I'm addressing, now that we have these challenges, what options do we have as women? And that's where I will address the question of what services we offer. But just to speak on the challenges, aside from the formal, yes, we have challenges with accessibility of courts, and most women will have recourse with the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So how compliant they are in terms of complying with constitutional or international human rights principles is a question that needs further discussion.
And it's a question I want to
Yes.
ask Ken, because I've seen what they are trying to do, training these elders in the villages. Just talk to us about the program, Ken, and how it works.
Okay, thank you. The program that works with elders to promote access to justice, informal justice, we identified elders. This is our mandate is based on Article 159(2) of the Constitution, 2C, which provides for alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. And one of them is traditional dispute resolution mechanism. So at Kelin, we identified elders because we note at the community there are already structures. Before the colonial period, we had a dispute resolution mechanism at the community. Those were the structures. And even during the early days of colonialism, we still had the African courts where we would use customary law. And then later on now, the 2010 Constitution has now recognized these structures. So taking advantage of this structure, it is now time to actually promote access to justice. How do we do this at Kelin? We identify the elders who are versed with cultural knowledge. And then we undertook them through a training on rights-based approach. Basically what we were capacity strengthening them on is the provisions of the Constitution. What should they be looking for? What are the competing interests? They should not discriminate based on gender or any other basis. Having such a group, now when they are faced with an issue at the community, they will be able to apply the law and culture as it is, not the perceived culture. And you will find they are better placed because most of the elders are hailing from the community. They know the history of the land, for example. They know history of the people they have interacted with them. So they will easily point out where someone is trying to mislead or trying to employ dubious mechanism, and also apply the law. So in so doing, we have been able to actually settle 905 disinheritance cases. So this is a mechanism that is actually working, and we've been actively involved in the development of alternative justice system policy. The one that it was launched last year during Katiba Day. So this is now even giving us more avenue to promote alternative dispute system, where we can now find means and modalities of engaging even duty bearers. For example, we have chiefs at the community. They face various cases on a daily basis, but a quick survey or just conversation with some of them, they do not have the legal backing. Secondly, law is something that develops. It is not static. Each and every day we have amendments. So if he was trained on an aspect, he could be applying it on different cases. So there is need to train chiefs too. So we also, at Kelin, we have trained 40 chiefs so that they are able to look at these issues from rights-based approach, apply the law to the dispute system, because alternative justice policy gives them avenue. They are one of the identified parties who can actually progress alternative dispute resolution mechanism. So working with them, giving the chiefs and the elders materials and doing refreshers is what we do. And when they have a case and they present the facts of the case, then we would actually give technical support. So we facilitate resolution of these cases at Kelin. So we give that technical support from the legal perspective, and then they would apply it to the case and come up with a resolution. So you find this is actually a speedy way of resolving disputes, because the parties will select a date, not date being imposed on them. Secondly, the parties will pick on a convenient place, venue of the meeting, and then it is the party to suggest the to suggest the solutions. So it is restorative vis-a-vis the formal process where you will have an order being made and the losing party will leave that place feeling that something unfair has been done to them. So you find that has been a speedy way of resolving cases. Even during COVID period, we've been working with elders just to intervene on these cases when courts had scaled down. There was no avenue for the vulnerable women in the society to access justice where they are being disinherited. And as noted, cases of gender-based violence were on the rise. So there was need to create avenues for the widows, the women to access justice, and this was one, it has actually served its purpose to enable the women to access justice.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And maybe before then we go for this quick break, maybe Sandra, you can just touch on, because it's really seeing the results of what they are doing, providing alternative working. Talk to us about the program that you're now training people to not only wait for lawyers to represent them, but actually represent themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, FIDA has been working on women rights issues for over 35 years now. And through that, we have tailored our interventions to look at access to justice. And with respect to access to justice, we have components or interventions that deal with training clients on how to represent themselves, so that in the event that they come to us and they have cases that are very simple in nature to understand, we are able to take them through training, build their capacity on how to represent themselves in court, to understand the court processes, so that they can actually be able to represent themselves. And the ripple effect of that is that they will be, it will enhance their awareness on their rights, and they will be community change agents when they go back to where they have come from.
I'm curious on whether this has worked, and definitely what other options that they have on the table. But we have to take a quick break. But before we do that, remember we asked you to be part of this conversation. Our question was, what was your take? What is your take on, of course, women and inheritance in Kenya? Let's get to see what some of you have been saying, if we can sample them very quickly. Timothy Simui says it's okay for women to inherit property. That's from parents or if the spouse dies. Thank you very much, Timothy. We have Joseph Kenya who says they should be given an equal share, just like the boy child. Thank you, Joseph Kenya. And Loft Vako says, kwani wanaume tu ndio wanafaa kufa wa kwanza. No, I am sure no one is saying that, Loft. And finally, we have Auguston who says, wife atafute pesa zake, will ni ya parents na kids. Thank you for your feedback that you've been sending us. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will have Justice Ombwaya to talk to us about the perspective of the judiciary in the progress that has been made in securing women's property and inheritance rights, the challenges, and the way forward. Don't go too far.
Get the best value for your money by subscribing today for Classic Bouquet at only 899 shillings for 30 days to enjoy 64 channels. Classic Bouquet. Premium content on Star Times. Subscribe today.
NTV Jioni, habari za kina, fasaha, tendeti na za kuaminika.
Nimempata hapa hadi tuko kwa park. Nashika kijana mwingine hapa kimchumchu.
Kuna shida. I thought you're head over heels in love na. Ilibidi nimekimbia kwa hizo heels vizuri.
Kwani anafanya?
Umegonga mtu mzee.
Puta nyoka na mpeleke kwako. Alafu nipigie simu.
What am I doing at your place?
Niliku. He found you laid on the side of the road.
I can't remember.
The doctor said it was common for memory loss after an accident.
I thought you said your brother found me on the side of the road.
Yeah.
From the house of Peptang, we enrich your meals from breakfast to dinner. With over 50 different products, our well-known brands have been in use since 1935. Shop online at peptang.dpo.store.
Can you get yourself inside my room? Let me take you up. Take you up. Let me take you down. Lay you down. Let me show you up. Show you up. Let me turn you on. Turn you on. Let me show you some good lo 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 lo. Lo 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 lo. Let me show you good lo 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 lo.
To get Lolo by Omar Lay, dial star 812 804 hash. Skiza, Non-Nation.
AMRC's objectives are aligned with the government's affordable housing pillar of the Big Four agenda. Visit any of the participating financial institutions today and start your home ownership journey. Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, unlocking liquidity for affordable housing.
Kama mama ameolewa kwa jamii fulani, acquire the title because even during the marriage, marriage certificate, so already that woman is already entitled to inherit all the husband property, because during that time of being together, they work hard together to acquire the wealth that is there. So to me, I believe it is a total benefit to that woman who has been left by the husband.
Kuna wamama ambao wamepoteza wazee wao, haki zao hawajaweza kuzipata mpaka sasa. Kuna wale ambao wamenyang'anywa urithi wao. Ninaomba tu jambo moja, serikali ikaweza tu kusikia kilio cha wamama wajane, mkaweza kuwakumbuka na kuwasaidia.
Mama anapoachwa na mzee wake anaaga, tunaona kwamba anapata changamoto kupata urithi wake ama kupata urithi wa mzee. Tunaona kama mzee alikuwa amenunua shamba, ndugu zake wanakuja hapo, wanachukua hiyo shamba na wanajifanya wajui kitu. Lakini haifai kuwa hivyo, sababu mtoto wa kike na mtoto wa kiume wote ni wa maana. Lakini katika itikadi zetu za Kiafrika ambazo zimepitwa na wakati, zinasema ya kwamba mwanamke asirithi, lakini haifai hivyo. Yafaa wote, mkubwa kwa mdogo, waweze kurithi. Sababu mali hiyo kwa wakati mwingi wanakuanga wametafuta pamoja.
The various views of the residents of Uasin Gishu, that is Eldoret in Uasin Gishu County, of course, on women's rights to property and inheritance. And we've, of course, been listening to other views from Kenyans from various walks of life. Let's now join the Honorable Justice Anthony Mbwayo, the presiding judge for the Environment and Lands Court in Kisumu. Justice Mbwayo, good morning. From the corridors of justice and the courts, have we made progress in terms of securing women's rights to property and inheritance? How far are we at the moment? What challenges have we faced? And perhaps where are areas that we need to see a bit more of improvement?
Thank you, Mr. Kiprop, again.
Yeah.
I will start by saying that, as you're aware, there is a family division.
Yes, proceed.
The matters to do with succession.
Mm-hmm.
This is a special division, principally to deal with the inheritance and succession matters. And also, as you're aware, the amendment of the Magistrates Court Act 2015 goes far to ensure that there's access to justice in inheritance matters, and that is magistrate courts have been granted jurisdiction. before that, it was only the High Court that could hear such matters.
Okay.
And that makes it easily accessible to justice in the far-flung areas where magistrate courts are situated.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, but
and also,
really, yeah. Please proceed, Judge.
Yes.
Please proceed.
As you're also aware, the courts have been at the forefront to ensure that women's rights, when it comes to inheritance, are protected. There are cases where custom works against the women, and as you know, those customs that are repugnant to justice and morality are null and void when it comes to law. Daughters have been allowed by the court to inherit from their deceased fathers. There are cases where the laws or the courts initially were of the view that the sons had a privilege to inherit the father's properties, but such cases, when they go on appeal, they are reversed, and the courts hold that daughters, just like sons, have the right to inherit the property of the deceased. And this has happened even in Maasai land, where initially the courts had held that the daughters were not supposed to inherit property because of the customary laws, but the same decisions were reviewed by the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
Where the Court of Appeal held that the daughters, just like the sons, have rights. That is, whether they are married or not married.
Okay.
So, as it stands now, the courts have come up with a legal view, and decisions that whether married or not married, the daughters have the right to inherit the property of the deceased, just like the sons. When it comes to spousal property or matrimonial property, the court looks at monetary contribution and non-monetary contribution. Monetary contribution could be such as a loan taken by the spouses to invest in property, to buy the property, invest in the property, and develop the property. Non-monetary contribution is a situation whereby the contribution is not measured in money, but it's measured in, let's say, issues such as supervision of the construction of the property. Maybe one of the spouses might have the money and the other and does not have the time. And the other spouse does not have the money and has the time.
Okay.
So the spouse with the money gives the spouse without the money the management of the property, so that the other spouse can go to the hardware, buy the property, buy the cement, supervise the construction works, and such kind of things to ensure that the property is fully developed. So that is non-monetary contribution, which is very important towards the development of the property.
Okay.
I also want to say that the judiciary has come up with an agenda to ensure that the women's rights when it comes to inheritance are protected, and also it has also come up with a book to give information to those people who are seeking legal services, to ensure that they are well informed and seek those services. Yes.
All right. Honorable Justice, before I let you go, then, part of the other issue that has also been raised on why we don't see many women trying to access justice from the courts is the issue of how long this cases take to conclude. And part of the reason that has been cited is the huge backlog of cases, even in the Environment and Lands Court.
Okay. When it comes to matters of inheritance, it is the High Court that has jurisdiction. But as I said earlier, now the magistrates' courts have been given an enhanced jurisdiction so that one does not have to travel far. There is now access to justice even in the close villages. And as you know, magistrates' courts are in every division of the country. So before that, there was a problem of delayed matters, delayed hearings, but with the enhanced jurisdiction of the magistrates' courts, I think that issue is going to be a problem of the past.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's Honorable Justice Anthony Mboya, the presiding judge for the Environment and Lands Court in Kisumu. If I can go back to Jen, then Jen, given your experience for the last 2 years that you've tried to seek justice even in the courts and even perhaps even outside, what would you like to see differently to change the situation, your situation, and even that of other women in your position?
Okay. What I would like maybe to change, especially to my fellow women who are suffering, maybe they can find a way whereby, especially on the financial part, we find like the feeder are really helping these fellow other women. They can create awareness and show them that there's a way you can come to feeder and get help even though if you don't have money. Also, you find that cases also, you find that there is someone who's filed a case 5 years ago and still they are still in court. Also, they can try and speed up the matters so that you don't have to stay in court for a lot of time, because like now you find like you get a lawyer maybe from Nairobi so that can come all the way to Turkana to help you in fighting your cases. And when that lawyer comes all the way from Nairobi to here, you have to pay those flights, you have to cater for somewhere for him to sleep and eat and everything, which becomes very expensive. So when the matters are, if they speed up the matters, you find that at least we can also be helped so that we don't waste a lot of time and money battling in court.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Yeah. And maybe if I can come back to you, Sandra and Ken, then, because you interact with these people almost every day. Ken, from where you sit, what needs to change if we are to see many women, sisters and widows who are being discriminated every day accessing justice?
Thank you. What needs to change is our mentality. Or our perceptions. Why do I say perception need to change? Because it is our link to patriarchy. As you had mentioned, most people in the community or women grew up knowing that this is a reserve for the men. We should not interfere with it. That is one. Secondly, there is lack of awareness of the laws. For example, you find we have a progressive constitution, but how many people have actually interacted with the constitution itself? How many people actually know their rights within the constitution? I like the intentionality that is under the County Governments Act, where they actually included a provision for civic education, and this is to be overseen by the county government. If we can have subsect of the government actually doing public, not public, but civic education, then we would be better placed. So many people would be knowing their rights, and we need to be intentional about this. We should not only leave it to the CSOs and other actors or gendered organizations, but it should be a duty to everybody of goodwill, so that we can change perceptions. Changing perception or attitude starts with knowledge. Gaining knowledge and then behavior, and then we'll have change in attitude. Like I had mentioned, our curriculum training, we trained 300 men, and most of them are currently championing for the rights of women. And these are the very men who at the initial stages of the training were actually against such training. So we need to roll out this training to a wider coverage or audience, so that we can have champions at various points in the country. That is to complement the civic education that would like to be championed by the state. So we have champions who are also advocating for equitable rights. And then we need to embrace culture. How do we embrace culture? We embrace culture as it is and align it to the Constitution. We find that it has a lot of it does a lot of good, but due to our attitude towards culture or modernization of culture, we actually stray from the intentions. So we need to create more awareness, or there is need to conduct a research. We did conduct a research on impact of culture on women, land and property rights. And our findings were that the perceptions, not the actual culture. If you speak to the Wazee, they will tell you this is the actual culture. We, girls and women, are allowed to inherit or own land. But if you hold a general talk with, let's say, you do a random sample of 20 men, you'll find some of them saying that the women will go and get married, they will own property from that end. It is actually speaking from the point of unknown. I agree with the Mzee from Eldoret, from the talk, the voice note that was played, in as much as he's old, is able to see through. We could be expecting him to be so ingrained into patriarchy, but he's able to see through the good that will be served by having equitable land and property rights. So as Kellen, we are calling for awareness creation. That is one of the things we would like to do. Secondly, to utilize culture in the good way, according to the Constitution. For example, doing mediations or alternative dispute resolution using the cultural structures to promote access to justice. Similarly, we would want to partner with likely-minded organization, because this is not a one-man job. It is traversing the country, and we need to reach out to every other person so that we create a link between policy and practice. So we are also asking for intentionality in partnership. Currently, we've partnered with Judiciary. We've developed IC material or information education material, which is a summary of the law on succession. So community persons are able to read the law, know the steps, and actually do succession. That builds on what Sandra had said in capacity building litigators to self-represent themselves. And right now, National Land Commission is tasked with looking into land injustices. We've partnered with them so that we can actually intervene, identify the opportunities, challenges, and then intervene. And then we have a long-lasting solution to the problems as we achieve our various organization goals. And lastly, we will also want to ask for donor support, because doing the capacity strengthening or curriculum training requires us to go to the field, requires us to at least get the participants means of coming to the venue, because they do not have means. So that we can progress this. And also we connect the vulnerable women and children, orphan children, with pro bono lawyers.
Okay.
And these ones, this also requires monetary input.
Okay.
So as we get that, we'll be able to upscale our work as Kelin, and in the long run, I believe, will be a gender transformative country where we respect rights, women's rights to property and inheritance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sandra, before I come to you on what needs to change in terms of the law, let me just get to listen from Justice Mboya. Justice Mboya, what do you, from where you sit on behalf of the judiciary, what else do you think should be done? What needs to change so that we can see more women accessing justice when it comes to matters of inheritance?
Thank you again. To begin with, I'll say that we have to begin with the source of the problem.
Yeah.
Which is in the village. We need to educate the administrators in the village, and that is the assistant chief, the chief, and the DO on the rights of the women when it comes to inheritance. There are cases whereby the chiefs and the assistant chiefs decline to list them as beneficiaries before the matter is filed in court, so that the access to justice begins with that list that is given to the assistant chief.
Okay.
We need to educate the entire community, the entire society,
okay,
that women have equal rights with men to inherit the property of the deceased. And also, we need to ensure that the Law of Succession Act, that is Cap 160 laws of Kenya, applies to all areas in the country, not to specific areas. And also, we need to amend the Act and deal with the issue of the life interest of the woman who decides to remarry after the death of the husband. We need to encourage alternative dispute resolutions.
Okay.
Because it makes litigation less costly.
Yeah.
And especially mediation. The courts have encouraged mediation.
Okay.
And we have seen some success when it comes to mediation, because parties are able to sit down and agree on the dispute. That they come up with their own decision, their own agreement, which is adopted by the court.
Okay.
And it has really worked. We need to move in that direction.
Okay. Thank you, Justice Mboya. And maybe to you, Sandra, because I think the judge has already touched on a few, but you had really mentioned, listed quite a number of limitations in terms of how the law is at the moment and how it is being interpreted. What would you like to see differently?
Okay, one is to harmonize the laws to be gender responsive and compliant. That means that the various pieces of legislation that have maybe certain sections that do not comply with the equality provisions in the Constitution or the realization of the equality rights under Article 45 need to be amended to comply with the Constitution for purposes of ensuring gender responsive policies and laws. Two is to appeal, and I appreciate what the judiciary is doing, and perhaps to have uniformity in terms of the precedents that comes from the higher courts with respect to the percentage of allocation of matrimonial property.
Yeah.
I think there cannot be any uniform because it has to be determined by various variables that the parties present to the court, but at least it's important so that it creates consistency, because some of the women say that this is a backlog, is a barrier towards the realization of their women property rights.
Yeah.
Aside from that is to operationalize the Legal Aid Act. Once, if the Legal Aid Act can be operationalized, then I think Kenyans across the country can be able to access free legal aid services. As we speak right now, I think the government has tried through the National Legal Service Board, but there is a lot that needs to be done, and the civil societies, FIDA being one of them, Kelin and Kituo cha Sheria, are offering free legal aid service, but there is a lot that needs to be done. And we do this through partnering also with other like-minded partners like pro bono lawyers, community-based organizations. We build their capacity so that they can be able to also offer free legal aid and also paralegals. So these are interventions that are way on board, but there is need to operationalize the Legal Aid Act. Thank you.
I'll take that as your closing remarks. In 20 seconds, Ken, your closing remarks.
Thank you. I would just like to call upon every citizen to actually make a point of reading our constitution, or teach or sensitize one of your own on the constitution, and call upon like-minded organizations to sensitize the community. That would be the first step in the good direction of realizing the right to land and property and inheritance, whether at the community level or at whatever level. And if we respect women land and property rights, then the voices at the community or the well-being of families will be ensured. Thank you.
All right, Jen, thank you for sharing your story. In 20 seconds, your parting shot.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'd like to request the concerned groups to ensure that they have created awareness, especially to the widows, and make sure that they understand their rights. Also, I would like also to request that also they can create awareness to the community, and to make that the community understand that the life has changed, and that even women nowadays, they have rights over property, not as before, whereby women were disadvantaged in everything over men. The final thing also, I'd like to say that also they can try and make it a bit cheaper for us to assess the justice.
Okay.
That's all.
Justice Mbwayo, your final word in 20 seconds exactly.
I would say that don't take the law into your own hands when enforcing your property rights. Come to court. There is access to court. Make sure that you solve your disputes through the courts.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And that's where we leave it. This has been our conversation on women's and inheritance property, women's property and inheritance rights, of course, and how that can be secured and improved using the laws that are currently in existence. Many thanks to Kenneth Akachi, is the Program Associate Women's Lands and Property Rights at Kelin, as well as Sandra Oyombe, she's the Senior Legal Counsel at FIDA Kenya, as well as Jen Kendi, a business lady in Lodwar, who has been able to share her story with us, as well as the Honorable Justice Anthony Mbwayo, the presiding judge of the Environment and Lands Court in Kisumu. From me and the entire team, that's where we leave it this morning. Many thanks to you, the viewers, for also keeping us company all through this 2 hours for this conversation. From me and the team, goodbye and God bless.